Thank you very much, Mary. And indeed, I had the privilege of knowing and being very friendly with Mary Cummins. She was great fun, but she was also a woman who kind of followed the spirit of feel the fear and do it. And I have to say that's always been my own approach to politics. Women candidates, by and large, had a good election. The gender quota for candidates, I think, worked as intended, and we now have more women TDs than ever before. But you wouldn't think that from observing the comings and goings of the past 6 weeks. The women TDs are really not having much of a role in the protracted post-election phase. I recall Enda Kenny saying that he wanted to see a cabinet split 50-50 between men and women. I'm not sure if that was an election promise or comment, but maybe Hildegard will enlighten us on that as regards Fine Gael. So, if we are moving to 50-50, which I think most of us want, so that we're not constantly counting how many men, how many women, people are just there naturally, and there's lots of men and lots of women. So if that's so, where are the female faces in the talks for government formation? The two main independent groups are women-free zones, really. In fact, Miriam Lord reports this morning that neither Maureen O'Sullivan or Catherine Sapone were invited to the meeting of independent TDs before last Wednesday's vote. Apparently the organisers forgot to tell them. So the Fianna Fáil team on the negotiation side is all male, as far as I know, while just Frances Fitzgerald has appeared on the Fine Gael team. This is very disappointing, and it suggests a 50-50 cabinet is not on the cards, or indeed anything approaching it, anytime soon. I hesitate really to talk about social media, and I listened in to some of the session last night. But talking about social media and the avalanche of junk and hate it continues to generate. I personally kept away from social media during the election, as even the smallest intervention on my part produced a wave of pure hate and unbridled misogyny. I noticed a post-election comment from Harry McGee in the Irish Times that some of the hate directed at me personally on the subject of my being adopted could merit action under incitement to hate laws. I was by no means the sole object of this venom, or indeed was I the recipient of the worst of the venom. Some male candidates got their share, but I think women candidates were the main victims. While Senator Maria Cahill wasn't a candidate, she continuously attracts a shocking level of hateful invective. So too did my colleague from Galway East, Senator Lorraine Higgins. Now, any controls over free comments are obviously controversial and difficult, but racist and homophobic comments are properly subject to controls in the published media. And these controls and frameworks for control, they're not regarded as censorship. There are domestic and international laws that require manufacturers of cars or other products to take full regard for public and consumer safety, with huge penalties for any failures. Yet, the mega billionaires of the internet age, who guard their own privacy with immense care, are very cavalier about any controls or restrictions on the content their products transmit, with no regard to the damage or hurt caused to individuals who become the targets of online abuse and hate speech. And my real concern, to be honest, is if this is what adults, are receiving, and adult women are receiving in particular, what's the story in terms of a young teenage woman and how she may be commented on by friends? I think as a society, that's something we need to think about. The Guardian newspaper is currently running a discussion called The Web We Want, to explore online abuse. Yesterday, one of its women commentators, Jessica Valenti, reported that an analysis of abusive comments, as many as 1.4 million comments, showed that 8 out of 10 abusive comments were directed at women writers. One of the paper's regular left-wing columnists, Owen Jones, wrote of women he knows who decline TV interviews because they would inevitably attract demeaning comments on their appearance. So he asks, are women to be purged from the media by obsessive misogynistic tirades? The Late Late Show had one item that I personally found deeply offensive and in poor taste. That show invited a UK psychologist to do a Freudian analysis of the 4 main leaders by studying their physical gestures during the debates. I didn't actually see the item until after the election, but you know, men kept mentioning it to me on the doorsteps and said, Joan, have you seen the Late Late? You have to see it. But obviously they didn't feel free to talk about it, but they kept saying to me, you have to see it. And I have to say, I was pretty surprised by it, because the analyst made some remarks about my lip gestures, not my hands, and saw in them some kind of reaction to early childhood rejection. A comment obviously deeply offensive to someone who didn't know their birth family or a birth mother. Now, RTE seemed to find the whole episode, somewhat hilarious, and while the host, Ryan Tubridy, demurred slightly, he seemed to find the idea amusing too. Now, I thought it was just vulgar, crude and demeaning. And going back to Mary Cummins, exactly the kind of thing that 30 years ago people like her railed against, that everybody should be respected for who they are, and we should junk the stereotypes. And certainly, and as I said, it was mostly men who talked to me about it. Maybe women, just took it more that this is the kind of thing that's done. The TV debates were big occasions during the election. They attracted huge audiences, as we see now in the USA and in other democracies. And I do wonder what debating skills tell about how the country will be governed. Political skills are a bit different. I remember when the law to decriminalise gay sex was under discussion more than 20 years ago by the Fianna Fáil Labour coalition. There was some nervousness in Labour that Fianna Fáil backbenchers might scupper the proposal, because it was a very socially advanced concept at the time to actually decriminalise homosexuality. And I remember talking to Dick Spring about it. He had no qualms. Maura Geoghegan-Quinn was the responsible minister, and Dick was completely confident that she had the right mix of skills to win the vote. And of course she did. But I don't think she did it by a kind of Socratic debate in the Fianna Fáil party rooms. Maura was a lot more robust than that, and is a lot more robust than that. Government works by patient negotiations, by memos, by discussions with civil servants and with advocacy and civil society organisations, by persuasion and even by deals and horse trading. The TV debates, they don't really give viewers a clue as to how parties would react to the stalemate that we are currently experiencing. Personally, I think the one-on-one interviews with Miriam, with Sean O'Rourke, with Pat Kenny are much better. They're much better forum in which to extract those ideas and get people to talk about them, or not talk about them if that's their position. But they could never command the media attention of the big TV events. I also want to make some comments about politics. Some of you, or a lot of you, might have seen the Spielberg film about Lincoln, and in it one of Lincoln's allies is arguing for a more radical policy than an anti-slavery amendment. Lincoln remarks that a compass will point you to your true north, but the compass doesn't tell you anything about the swamps and the chasms and the raging rivers that lie between your position and finding and getting to your true north. So if you plunge ahead regardless of the obstacles, you may just sink in a swamp. In that case, what's the value or what's the use of knowing true north? And this is where politics comes in. Politics is a space where you learn to navigate the barriers that stand in the way of achieving your purposes, and that space does involve compromise, delays and deals that can, and they do, offend and sometimes even shock the observer. A New York Times columnist, David Brooks, observed recently the growing influence of various anti-politics factions. These factions want outsiders to sweep away the establishment, the caste, the elite, or whatever other pejorative noun that takes your fancy. And he says they offer perpetual harangues, bluster and aggression as substitutes for analysis, and sneer with disdain at any kind of measured response. They denounce compromise, deal-making and all the traditional arts of politics as corrupt and treacherous, as if past progress never involved these dark arts. So I wonder where this is going to lead. I'm in favour of the strictest laws and rules with harsh penalties to prevent corruption or influence peddling. The outgoing government, for instance, we passed numerous laws on freedom of information, lobbying, whistleblower protection. But all of these, or none of these, gel together as a programme of political reforms. But politics as a profession is an honourable one, and women should not balk from full participation in it, as long as you brace yourself for the deep-rooted antipathy to women who seek a leading role. And the same is possibly true in terms of media management, and we'll hear about that, I'm sure, as well now. I would strongly suggest do read Julia Gillard's book on her experience of misogyny in Australian politics and be prepared for similar attitudes. A British academic, Bernard Crick, wrote a book called In Defence of Politics, and I had a look at it before coming down here. Politics, says Crick, is a way of ruling divided societies without undue violence. And we do live in Ireland and in most societies in a divided society, divided by wealth, class, culture, social attitudes, and indeed gender. There's lots of differences in every society. Yesterday I was at a school in my own constituency which has pupils from no less than 60 different countries. And that's commonplace in the constituency I represent in Dublin West. So the result of that is a big, diverse society, a melting pot that's difficult to govern at the best of times, but it's especially difficult when the economic situation is very harsh for a lot of people. So there are essentially two ways of getting things done in such a society: politics or coercion. In many ways, the Troika exercised a coercion role in the early years of the outgoing government, as they held, and they really did, held control of the purse strings. Now they still exercise a supervisory role that cannot be entirely ignored. But we are now back to politics. And in political life, you have to acknowledge that the society you seek to govern has a multitude of groups and interests. Every day you need to find a way to balance these so that you're not causing perpetual divisions and you're providing for more and better equality and fairness. The downside of that approach is that everything can appear very messy and rather in disarray. Diverse societies generate tensions that require us to find ways to resolve them calmly by perpetual conversation and argument. In my experience of politics, women are much more open to collaboration and discussion. And that I can say as well, I don't know if the other women here agree, sometimes drive men to the point of pulling their hair out when they're fortunate enough to have a full head. There are differences, And I think it's helpful at a conference like this to explore the differences so as where we can respect them and get on with it. Because collaboration and discussion, it is the way that change comes about in a democratic society. So we need more women than ever to be involved. And really, your country, our country, needs you more than ever. Thank you.